Hello, in this video lesson I'm going to show you how to use Photoshop Elements 11 to fix a variety of common photo problems. Here's our start image, and you can see there's a bit of a space here on the right and a tilted horizon, so we're going to crop the shot to improve composition and straighten the horizon. We've also got a bit of a blue colour cast in these backlit areas of the swans, so we're going to warm that up. And we're also going to restore missing highlight detail. Here's the after version, there's the before, and you can see that this version here has got very blown out highlights. I'll also show you how to do some more subtle things like removing colour fringes using a variety of adjustment layers, and we're also going to boost the colour saturation as well to give the shot more impact. And we're even going to tidy up a little bit of the mess in the foreground here. We've got some leaves and feathers and things that could be a bit distracting. So I'll show you how to fix all of these common photo problems now. So kick off by going to File, Open and browsing to Problems Before.jpg. And if you're using Photoshop Elements 11, you may notice it's a very basic workspace. You might want to be able to get these palettes floating on their own. So if you click on More's flyout icon down here, you can scroll down to Custom Workspace, which is just out of the edge of my screen there. And Custom Workspace gives you these tabs. You can then drag out the ones you're interested in and then go to Window and hide the panel bin. And you've got a much leaner and cleaner interface, which is similar to those in earlier versions of Elements like version 10, version 9 and so on. And indeed, everything I do in Photoshop Elements 11 you can do in earlier versions of the package. So let's grab the crop tool by clicking here, and then you can see the options bar appears at the bottom of the window instead of at the top, but it works in the same way. Let's just tick here to choose Use Photo Ratio and then click here to close the options bar. Click and drag to make a selection, and then if you drag a corner handle it will stay in the same shape as the original photograph. So take it down to around about here, and then you can click and drag outside to rotate it so that these horizontal lines in the overlay run with the tilted horizon in the background. You can then click and drag like so to make sure that you're not moving outside of the photograph's area, or otherwise you might then end up with a bit of transparency or colour at the very edge of the frame. So there's our cropped window. Click the tick to apply it, and it will rotate it and crop it at the same time, as you can see in just a tick. There we go. Now before we restore these missing highlights, let's just open up the layers palette a little bit more, click on the background layer and press Command or Control J to duplicate the layer, and then we can pop up to Enhance, go down to Adjust Lighting and choose the Shadow Highlights command. Now by default it lightens the shadows because it's assuming the shot is backlit, but we don't actually need that, so let's drag this down to the left and let's take darken highlights up to around about 42, and you can see it's clawing back highlight detail, especially on areas like the swan's bright wings. There's the preview of the before, there's the after, and it's making quite a dramatic difference. Click OK to apply the change. So here's the edited layer with the extra highlight detail. I'll turn that off to show you the original, and you can see that it's also dulled this sky a little bit too much while it's sorted out the swan quite nicely. So what we're going to do is create a selective adjustment by adding a layer mask, and to do that let's go to Layer, let's choose Layer Mask, and let's choose Hide All for the moment. It creates a black mask that hides all of the attached layer. We can then paint a brush onto the mask and then reveal the highlight detail in exactly the areas that we need to see it. So let's click here to grab the brush tool. Make sure you've got the actual brush tool selected and not some of the variants, and then choose a nice soft brush from the brush preset picker. Set the size to around about 500 or so. You can type in a value here if you want to be precise, and set the opacity to 100%. Make sure the foreground color is white. You can click here if it's not, and then click on the mask to target it. We can then hide the options bar and spray the white brush tip over the areas that we want to actually reveal on this attached layer, and that brings back the restored highlight detail that we made with the Shadows Highlights command. Now when we turn this layer on and off, you can see it's only affecting the area that we painted on. We can also affect the sky as well and bring back a little bit more highlight detail there, but not as much, by using the brush tool again. So let's just click here, up pops the options bar. If we take the opacity down to around about 30% or so, we get a weaker brush stroke. It's a semi-transparent stroke now because it's grey instead of white, and we can then use a larger brush tip with a right square bracket just to darken some of those highlight details, but not as much as we darkened the areas on the swan. You can see we've got some lighter semi-transparent strokes on the mask there. Our swans are still fairly backlit, so they don't stand out as much as they could. So what we're going to do is go up to Layer, choose New Adjustment Layer, and choose Levels. Then click OK to apply the adjustment layer like so, and you'll see a window like this appear, and an adjustment layer will appear in the Layers panel. And what we're going to do is lighten up the midtones by dragging this slider to the left to about 1.45, and you can see we have much brighter midtones. We're also going to create more contrast by darkening the shadows to around about 14, and at the moment that's making a change to the entire layer. So what we're going to do is click on here, press Command or Control and I to invert it, and again we're hiding the adjustment layer. We can then paint in the areas that we want to actually lighten using the brush tool. So pop down to here to grab the brush tool, and then make sure that you've got a size of around about 400, opacity of 35%. Click to target the mask. Let's just close that up again. And now if we spray on this particular area, we're lightening up the levels adjustment layer by allowing it to take effect, and that's a cool way of brightening up our backlit swans without changing the tones in the rest of the shot. If you take the left square bracket and tap that a few times, you can get a smaller tip, and that's a cool way of just lightening up the swan here. And you can see I've got a bit of a swan shape there appearing on my layer mask. I'm going to do that with this swan's head as well. If we turn this area on and off now, you can see it's just lightening up these swans, making them stand out in a very subtle way, but that's a cool way of just overcoming our backlit subject. It's probably also worth using the right square bracket for a larger tip and just spraying gently over the leaves just to lighten those up as well and draw attention to these lovely autumnal leaves that we have in the background. Now the shot's colours are a little bit too cool. There's a slight colour cast there. So what we're going to do is warm things up using another adjustment layer. So go down to here. This time we're going to go for Photo Filter. Click OK in the new layer window like so, and then what we need to do is go down to warming filter and change that to LBA and reduce this to 17% or so for a more subtle effect. And then I'll just show you the before and after. There's the before, slightly cold and blue around the swan's backlit feathers, and turn this eye on again, and there's the slightly warmer version. So we've corrected our cold blue colour cast and warmed things up a little bit. And talking of colours, our colours are rather drab, so let's pop up to Layer, go down to New Adjustment Layer and choose Hue Saturation. We can click OK here, and then we've got a new slider to play with. If we drag saturation up to 30, then that will change the master channel at the top here, which is all of the colours in the shot, and they'll be much more vibrant. There's the before, there's the after, much better looking colours. Now if we grab the zoom tool up here and then right click, we can choose actual pixels to zoom right in on our swan, and then use the spacebar to then move around with the mouse like so. And you can see we've got a bit of a purple fringe around the edge of contrasting areas. And to get rid of that, all we need to do is go to the magentas and drag that down to the left with the saturation, and that gets rid of those particular colours without changing any of the other colours in the shot. We've got quite a few layers in the layer stack now, so what we're going to do is click on the top layer, press Shift, Command, Alt and E, or Shift, Control, Alt and E if you're on a PC, and that will then merge all of these layers together into one single flat layer. Now click on Layer 2 and press Command or Control J to duplicate it, and then right click with the zoom tool and choose actual pixels, and you can see lots of nasty colour noise in the background, especially in the soft focus areas. So to get rid of that, we need to go up to Filter, choose Noise, and then choose Reduce Noise. And here we can see a preview of the shot, and if we take colour noise up to 100, you'll notice that the colour noise vanishes. If you click, there's the before, let go, there's the after, and that gets rid of most of that unsightly colour noise. We can then get rid of some of the luminance noise as well by setting strength to around about 5, and then we'll just drag preserve details up as well to around about 44%, just so that we've got some of the key swan details. So click OK to get rid of that nasty noise. And finally, click here to create a new transparent layer, and then grab this tool here, which is the Spot Healing Brush tool, and make sure that you've got Sample All Layers ticked, set Content Aware by clicking here, and then what we need to do is just click and spray on this top layer and tidy up things like leaves, which we want to get rid of. So we've got a bit of a cleaner looking grass there. It's having a bit of a think. It's going to replace that with a patch of grass. There's a feather here as well. So you can tidy up your photographs and remove any distracting objects quite easily at the very end. Hello, in this festive video lesson I'm going to show you how to use Photoshop elements to create a Christmas card that showcases some of your photography. Here we have the end result, and we've extended the canvas so we can print and fold this to create a card shape. We've added a simple border that reflects the idea of snow and some simple and elegant text as well, just to not distract the eye too much from the actual contents of your photo. So let's kick off by opening cardbefore.jpg. I'm using Photoshop Elements 11, but there's nothing we're doing here that you can't do in earlier versions of the package. So let's grab the crop tool. The options bar appears down the bottom here, and let's set this to no restriction. And then if we hold the shift key, we can draw a perfectly square shape that will then be the front of our card. I can use the arrow keys to move that around a little bit and then hit return or click the tick to apply the crop. Now at this stage the locked background layer is uneditable, so double click to make it editable by clicking OK. It's now unlocked and we can now go and increase the canvas size to create our card shape, and to do that we're going to go up to Image, go down to Resize and choose Canvas Size, and it pops this little window here, and there you can choose the percentage rather than the centimeters option, and you can then click here to extend it to the left of the main image, and we're going to extend it by 200%. So let's just type in that value there and then click OK, and you'll see we've extended the canvas like so. The next thing to do is to pop up to here and create a new layer by clicking, drag that below our photograph like so, and then what we're going to do is go to Edit, and we're going to fill that layer with white, and you can get white from here if it's not already there, and click OK to create your white background. Before I create my border at the top here, I'm just going to move the layers palette to the left to create some space. You'll notice we're not getting a preview of the extended canvas because this top layer here is transparent, but what I can do is just turn that on by going to this flyout icon here, going to panel options and say show entire document. Click OK, and you'll now see we can see the transparent section of that top layer. It's not really important, but you may be wondering why it looks slightly different to your setup. Next thing to do is to pop up to layer 0, pop up to layer and choose layer mask and choose reveal all, and that attaches a layer mask to the layer. We're going to edit this now to create our border using the brush tool. So click here to select that in the options bar. Make sure you've got the actual brush tool here. These two icons are being clicked, and then what we can do is click on the brush preset picker and scroll down to a spatter brush for a little bit more texture, and you can see if you hold over there you get the label. So we're going to go for spatter 59, which is this one here. Click to select that. We want a nice strong brush, so let's set the opacity to 100%, and let's click here to set the foreground colour to black. We're just going to modify the shape of the brush now by clicking on brush settings. In older versions of Elements you can go to the top at the options bar and click the brush dynamics icon, and you'll get a window like this, enabling you to then adjust the scatter value to 11% like so, and there you can see we've got a snowy brush tip type edge to our modified brush. Now click on the white layer mask, and if we spray black on the mask we'll make parts of this layer transparent, and the only bits we're going to make transparent are the borders. So if I click here and then hold the shift key and click down the bottom, it will draw a straight line between the 2 points and create a nice straight stroke. I'm going to do that again. I'm holding down the shift key and clicking, and it's drawing another straight line between those 2 points. I'm going to shift click up here, and there's our third stroke, and shift click again to complete our border with nice straight lines, and we can draw those very quickly using that technique. So the card is shaping up quickly. We're now going to add a Christmas greeting using the horizontal type tool. So click here to select that. You can see we've got the type tool selected in the options bar as well. There are other types, but we're going to go for horizontal, and we're going to click here to choose the font family. I'm going to go for Hoffler text because it gives you a nice kind of serify Christmas look without being too over the top, and then we're going to set this to regular, and a size of around about 60 will give us a larger text. So I'm going to go scroll down to the bottom there. It's just off the screen, but you could type in 60 here. So the next thing to do as well is to choose the central alignment option, which is this one here, and then I can type in Merry Christmas. I'm going to go for white text to match my snowy background, so click here to swap the colours, click up here to start typing. A text layer will appear in the layers palette, and let's just type in Merry, hit return and then type Christmas, and there we have our Christmassy text. You can click and drag anywhere just to position it like so, and then click the tick to apply it. Now to make the text stand out a wee bit more, I'm going to go up to Window and get the Effects panel up by clicking here, and then we're going to go to Styles, and you've got a nice drop shadow, the hard edge one there. If we just drag that onto the text, it makes it stand out like so. I can then go back to Window and hide the Effects panel again for a clearer interface. And because we're working with lovely layers, we can grab the Move tool and just click on the text and move that to the right a little bit with the arrow keys, and we can also change the blending mode of that as well to make it blend with the colours in the layer below by going down to Overlay, and that just adds a nice wash of colour into the white text. Let me just click to deselect the Move tool and hit Tab to hide the floating windows, and there is our finished Christmas card design.
Hello, in this video I'm going to show you how you can get the look of digital colour infrared without having to use a converted camera or an infrared filter. You can see this is our start image here, and if I flick back to the finished image you can see how we have these glowing greens and this really dark sky, and these are characteristic of the colour infrared effect. And to get these shifts in colour and tone we're mostly going to be using Adobe Camera Raw, but we're going to switch to Photoshop at the end of the project to apply a touch of blur to the clouds. If I flick back to my start image here you can see the clouds are fairly sharp, and if I go back to the after image you can see how we've added this movement blur to the clouds, and this is also typical of the infrared look because you'd use a long exposure when capturing infrared images. So to begin with I'm going to highlight my colour IR before.dng file here in Adobe Bridge, and I'm going to right click on it and choose Open in Camera Raw, and it will pop up in the Adobe Camera Raw interface. And I'm going to start by making a few changes in the basic panel here inside Camera Raw. So I'm going to bring the shadows up to about +64, and you'll see how this has an effect on the land here in the foreground. Just lighten the tones around here. I'm also going to increase the colour intensity by bringing vibrance up to about 37. And this will increase the saturation of the less saturated tones in the image. Next I'm going to grab the targeted adjustment tool from the toolbar up here. And once I've got the tool selected, I can right click and choose from different options. We have parametric curve, hue, saturation, luminance and grayscale mix. So I'm interested in these three options here in the middle, hue, saturation and luminance. I can use these three options to change the characteristics of different colour ranges within the image. So first of all, I'm going to select luminance, and then I'm going to click on the green grass here and drag upwards, and you can see how that changes the settings on the right of the screen in the HSL grayscale panel. I'm going to drag both of the yellows and the greens right up to 100. So you can see how the targeted adjustment tool gives us interactive control over the tones in the image just by clicking on certain colours and dragging up or down. So I'm going to right click with the tool now and choose saturation, and then I'm going to drag down on the grass here, and you'll see how this affects the yellows and green sliders again. So I'm going to bring that back until the yellows are about -90, and I think we'll also just drag greens back slightly to about -70, somewhere around there. And I think we're beginning to see some of the changes in tone that we're after with the infrared look. I think perhaps we could drag the greens back slightly more to about -80. And then I'm going to right click again and choose hue this time. And again I'm going to click and drag down. And I think we'll set the hue of the yellow and green sliders to about -100, and you can see how that just warms those tones in the grass slightly. Next I'm going to go to the camera calibration panel here, and I can use the sliders here to tweak the saturation of the different colour channels. So I'm going to drag the shadows tint back to about -23 just to reduce the magenta in the shadows. And I'm going to set the red primary to hue 45, saturation 15, and then I'm going to bring the green primary back to -20 on the hue and -76 on the saturation, and then the blue primary we're going to go for hue +5 and saturation +18. And obviously these settings aren't set in stone. You can just play around with these sliders until you get the look that you're after. But I'm pretty happy with that. So now I'm going to move on and make some selective adjustments to different areas of the image. And I can do this with the adjustment brush, which you can find in the toolbar up here. So I'm going to click on that, and you can see how that gives me a set of sliders on the right of the screen here. And I can paint masks and then use these sliders to adjust certain parts of the image. By default, the tool remembers the last used settings, so if you want to set a different adjustment, you're going to need to reset all of the sliders every time. So we can reset sliders quickly by double-clicking on them like this. I'm just going to reset all my sliders, and then I'm going to bring exposure back to about -0.45, somewhere around there. Now, if I click in the middle of the sky here, you can see how that sets a pin. And if I hover over the pin, you can see the beginnings of the mask there in green. Now we can set a colour for our mask down at the bottom of the adjustment brush settings down here. You can see we have a bright green colour chosen for our mask overlay. This just makes it easier to see where we're painting. I'm going to check show mask so we can see the mask, and then I'm going to paint over the rest of the sky. So I'm going to resize my brush tip using the square bracket keys on my keyboard, or you can use the sliders down here, but I find it's easier to use the square bracket key. So the right square bracket key will make our brush tip larger, the left square bracket key will make it smaller, and I'm simply going to paint over the sky like this fairly roughly to paint a mask. And the area that we're painting over is going to be affected by that change in exposure that we set up here. So it's going to result in a slightly darker sky. And we can see that if we go back down to here and uncheck show mask, and you can see if I toggle my preview on or off, that's the before and that's the after. And if you need to, you can always fine tune the area that you're painting over. So I'm going to recheck show mask and just fine tune this area around here, because I think we could be slightly tidier where the sky meets the rocks there. So I'm going to paint deliberately over the rock slightly, then I'm going to hold Alt, and that will allow me to subtract areas. So just by painting with Alt, we can erase parts of our mask, or we can go up here and check erase and then paint with the tool again to erase the mask where it hits the rocks over here. It's all just about fine-tuning the effect. And then if I uncheck show mask again, you can see how that's working. Next, I'm going to go to the settings at the top here and check new. And this means I can set another pin over the land here. So I'm going to click once over the land and you can see how that sets another pin. And I want to apply some different tonal settings to the land. So I'm just going to go up to the settings here and I'm going to bring exposure up this time to about 0.55. I'm also going to bring contrast up to about +18 and shadows up to about +16 as well. Then I'm going to go back and check show mask, or you can use the keyboard shortcut Y and that will toggle the mask on or off. And then I'm going to paint over the land like this with my brush to apply those tonal settings over the land here. And if I hit Y, that will toggle the mask off and you can see the results of the change in tone. Now I'm going to add a third new pin over the grass here, and I'm going to use this pin to brighten up the foliage, the parts of the image that were originally green. So I'm going to click on the grass here to set another pin, then go up to my tonal settings again and we'll bring exposure back this time to about +0.20 just to add a touch more lightness to this area. And we'll also just double click the contrast slider to reset it and the shadow slider, and we'll up the shadows to about +30. And then I'm going to click the color box, which you can find down here, and I'm going to add a touch of color. So you can see we have hue set to 327, saturation, we'll bring that up to about 16. And then hit OK. And then let's zoom in for a slightly closer look before we paint this mask. So I'm going to use the Command or Control and plus shortcut. That's Command and plus on a Mac, Control and plus on a PC. If I hit that a couple of times, we'll zoom in, and then I can hold the space bar and drag to move around the image. And then I'm going to hit Y so we can see the mask over this pin that we've just set. And I can paint to add to the mask around areas of grass like this. And again, I can just use my square bracket keys on my keyboard to resize the brush tip as I paint. So you can see I'm being fairly rough about this. We don't need to be too precise because the tonal change isn't that noticeably different. It's quite subtle, but it's going to add some glow to these areas of green around here. I think we'll just do the same over this side, and we're going to need a slightly smaller brush. And obviously I'm being quite quick about my painting. You can be a bit more precise with your images if necessary. Let's just finish off over here. And then once again, we can hit Y to hide the mask to give us a better idea of the effect. And you can see how we're getting this pinkish tone because of the color settings that we set over here. And we're also getting a slight glow to the grass if I come back over this way. Now I'm going to add one final pin for the trees in the background here. So I'm just going to resize my brush tip slightly smaller, then set a pin over the trees over here. And then let's go back to our tonal settings. And we'll bring exposure up to about +0.7. And let's just reset the shadows. And we're also going to bring clarity up to about +47 just to add some sharpness to the mid-tones, somewhere around there. And then I'm going to hit Y again to show my mask, and then just paint over the trees in the background here, because I want to add more glow, because these trees typically would be glowing quite heavily in an infrared image. So I'm just going to paint quite roughly over these trees, and I think perhaps we could just swipe a couple of times over this area of grass here as well, just to brighten up those tones. Let's just zoom out slightly with Command or Control and minus, and just add a few more dabs around here. And again, I can hit Y once I've finished painting my mask to see the results. Next, I'm going to switch to the graduated filter tool, and you'll see how the options on the right here are very similar. In fact, we need to reset our sliders again, and then we'll bring highlights back to about -38 and shadows back to about -53. And then I'm going to use these settings to darken down this corner of the image by dragging a line here, and you'll see how this adds a gradient between these 2 points that I've created. Anywhere above the green line is going to be completely affected by these changes, and between the green and the red point we have a blend of a before and after, and below the red line here this area remains unaffected. And you may have spotted that my sky has got a slight pink cast to it, and that's because I forgot to turn off the pinkish tone that we set when we wanted to add some glow to the grass here. But this is the great thing about working in Adobe Camera Raw. I can tweak any of these adjustments at any time, so I simply need to go into my color settings and drag the saturation back down to 0, and you can see how that's fixed that problem in the sky. Now I'm finished making selective adjustments, so I'm going to click the zoom tool just to bring me back into my view where I can see all these panels here. Then I'm going to click on the tone curve, and making sure I have point selected up here, I'm just going to drag a point upwards in the highlights here, and then drag a second point down in the shadows here, just to boost the overall contrast of the scene, to make it a touch more punchy like that. I can tweak these points to add more contrast if I like. And let's just double click the hand tool just to bring me to a full screen view, just so the image is slightly larger. And then I'm going to go to the split toning panel, which you'll find along here. And I'm going to add some warmth into the highlights. So first of all, I'm going to just up the saturation to about +14, and then I'm going to bring the hue to about 59, somewhere around there, and you can see that just adds a touch of yellow to the highlight tones and warms the areas around here. Now if I grab the zoom tool and just zoom into this area over here, you can see we have this color fringing around areas of high contrast where dark tones meet light tones. We can fix this with the lens correction panel here, just by going to the color settings and checking this box to remove chromatic aberration, and you can see how that fixes that color fringing. Then we can double click the hand tool again to go back out to full screen. And the last thing we're going to do in Adobe Camera Raw is to apply grain and a vignette using the effects panel here. So I'm going to bring the grain amount up to about 37, and we'll set size to 31, and then we'll bring the post-crop vignetting amount slider back to about -15 just to darken the corners, and that will add some really nice grain and also just draw the eye in by darkening the corners of the frame. And I'm done with Adobe Camera Raw now, so I'm going to hold Shift, and you'll see how my Open Image button here switches to Open Object, and if I click there, that will open my image into Photoshop as a smart object. And this gives me the added advantage of being able to send the image back to Adobe Camera Raw at any time, simply by double clicking the layer thumbnail in the layers panel. So you can see if I just go to Window Layers to bring my layers panel up, how this layer is a smart object. You can tell because it has this little icon in the corner here, and if I double click here I can send the image back to Adobe Camera Raw. Next I'm going to add the motion blur to the clouds here that we talked about earlier, and I'm going to do this by going to Filter, Blur and Radial Blur, and then I can choose a center point for my blur. So I'm going to bring the center point over here slightly. I'm going to choose the zoom blur method because we want our blur to go towards that center point, and I'm going to set the amount to about 12 and then hit OK. And you can see the effect that has of suggesting movement in the clouds, but obviously it's affecting the land too. So I need to mask the filter effect over the land, and I can do this by highlighting the Smart Filter thumbnail here, and then I can paint with black over the image while this thumbnail here is active to hide the effect. So I'm going to grab the brush tool, set black as my foreground colour, and I'm going to choose a soft edged circular brush like that one there. And again, I can resize my brush tip with the square bracket keys on my keyboard, and then I can paint to hide that blur effect over the land. So I'm just painting quite roughly over the land here with a big soft brush. And you'll see on my filter thumbnail here, the areas that I've painted over will appear in black after a second. There we go. So you can see how we're able to mask the blur effect so that it's only applied to the sky. Let's just tidy up this area around here also. And now I'm just going to finish off by tweaking the tones with a couple of adjustment layers. So I'm going to click the Create New Adjustment Layer icon here at the bottom of the Layers panel, and I'm going to choose Hue Saturation. Now I can target different colours using the drop down here. So I'm going to target the blues first, and then I'm going to drag the lightness slider back. And you can see how that darkens the sky and gives me that rich dark sky that's characteristic of the infrared effect. So I'm going to bring that back to about -73. Then I'm going to target the red channel. Let's just move my layers panel out of the way for a second. And I think we'll up the saturation on the red channel and bring it to about +33, somewhere around there. And then we'll bring the lightness up to about +62. And that's fine. And then let's go to the yellow channel, and I'm going to bring lightness up on the yellows to about +61. So this is all just about fine-tuning the colours and the overall look, and I'm happy with that. So I'm going to finish off by adding a curves adjustment layer. So just click the Create Adjustment Layer icon and choose Curves, and once again I'm going to add an S-shaped curve like this just to boost the contrast of the scene. And you can see how that gives us a slight magenta cast here in the clouds. So I'm going to double click my hue saturation adjustment layer here to bring me back into the hue saturation settings. Then I'm going to go to my magentas and drag the saturation down to about -50. And that fixes that problem. So there we go. That's my finished infrared image. Thanks very much for watching.
We're here at the launch of the Nikon D5200, the replacement for the 16 million pixel 5100. Perhaps one of the most important features about the D5200 is that it's got a new 24.1 million pixel sensor. We're told that that's not the same sensor as in the D3200. The new 24 million pixel sensor is coupled with an XP 3 processing engine that we've seen before. And this allows sensitivity to be set in the range of ISO 100 to 6400, but it can be expanded to 25,600. In addition, the maximum continuous shooting rate has been boosted to 5 frames per second. Let's take a look at some of the things that separate the D5200 from the D5100. Firstly, there's the same 39-point AF system that we've seen in the D7000. This allows greater precision and also better tracking of moving subjects. Another point is that the metering sensor has been upgraded to a 2016 pixel RGB sensor. This informs the improved advanced scene recognition system. For video shooters, there's an audio in port so you can connect an external mic, but there's no audio out port for monitoring the sound. And of course, there's also full HD video recording at 60i, 50i, 30p, 25p and 24p. In terms of control layout, the D5200 is remarkably similar, in fact almost identical to the D5100, but the graphic user interface has changed. It looks more modern and quite a bit cleaner. The camera's in aperture priority mode, and if I change the aperture using the dial, you can see that reflected on the user interface. You can also see that the shutter speed is changing. We're also told that the camera is a little bit lighter than the model it replaces, but it still feels very comfortable in the hand. There's a firm grip, which is just deep enough for your fingers. I've got to put my little finger underneath the grip. And it's covered with a nice textured coating, so it feels very secure in your hand. And it's still got the articulating screen, but Nikon hasn't upgraded this to a touch screen. It's still not touch sensitive. There's no sensor next to the viewfinder, so if the screen's lit when you hold it to your eye, it will stay on, but as soon as you half press the shutter release, it goes off. Like the D5100, the D5200 has a special effects mode. We can select the special effects modes using this dial here, and then we can just rotate through the options. So these are JPEG only effects that we can use. We'll just go through them. We've got night vision, colour sketch, miniature effect, selective colour, where you get a black and white image but the selected colour is maintained, silhouette, high key, and finally low key. So that's the D5200 in a nutshell. We'll be hoping to get some more information soon. Hi, I'm Angela Nicholson, Head of Testing for Future's Photography Portfolio, and this is the Canon EOS M. Inside the M is the same Digic 5 processing engine and 18 million pixel APS-C format sensor as in the Canon 650D. But as you can see, it's a considerably smaller camera. Canon seems to have used its PowerShot range of compact cameras for inspiration for the design of the M, and it has a fairly flat, rectangular shape with rounded corners. There's not much in the way of a grip on the front of the camera, so it feels a little unbalanced with the new 18 to 55mm lens mounted, and it's a good idea to attach the strap that's supplied to carry it between shots. Like the 650D, the M has a 3-inch touchscreen with over 1 million dots, but it's fixed on the back of the camera rather than articulated. The screen is a capacitive device like an iPhone screen, and I found it very responsive, so it's a pleasure to use when making settings adjustments. This is just as well though, because the M has a fairly limited number of direct controls. On the top of the camera we've got a dial to switch between green square mode, which is entirely automatic, camera mode and video mode. Go back to camera mode. It's in aperture priority at the moment. Just touch that icon. I can switch to shutter priority or TV. Press the shutter, release, and there we are in shutter priority mode. The quick menu provides access to key features such as image quality, white balance and creative effects such as grainy black and white and miniature, etc. These filter effects can only be used when you're shooting JPEGs, so if you shoot RAW files or RAW and JPEG files simultaneously, you'll have to change file format before you can use them. I like the grainy black and white filter, and the miniature effect is fun, but I can't say I'm a huge fan of the others. Aspects such as aperture and sensitivity can be set using the touchscreen and or the direct controls. Just touch the icon for the feature you want, like this, and then either adjust it on screen or use the dial on the back of the camera. If you're used to buttons and dials, you may find that you start off using them, but gradually you'll switch over to using the touchscreen. Although the screen provides a clear view inside and in low light, it's not so good when the sun is out, and reflections are a real problem. I can usually make out the main elements of the scene, but smaller details are lost. It's a shame because there's no viewfinder on the M, or even a port to attach an external viewfinder. There's also no flash built in, but there is a hot shoe which is compatible with all Canon's current flash guns. And in the UK, the new Speedlight 90EX is included in the kit. Because the mirrorless design of the M allows the lens mount to be close to the sensor to make the camera smaller than an SLR, it's not directly compatible with Canon's existing SLR lenses. As a result, Canon has given the M a new mount called EFM. At present there are just two lenses with this mount, an 18 to 55 f3.5 to 5.6 image stabilised lens and a 22mm f2 pancake lens. There's also an adapter that allows EF and EFS mount lenses to be used on the M. Both of the new EFM lenses have an STM or stepper motor autofocus drive, which is designed to make focus slower and smoother during video shooting. It's effective for video, but it's not so good for stills photography. In good light, the M's autofocus speed is decent enough, but in low light or when the subject is close, there's a distinct backwards and forwards adjustment of the focus. It's also a little bit slower than competing systems from the likes of Panasonic and Olympus, and it sometimes means there's a slight delay between touching the screen and the image being taken in touch shutter mode. This is a little bit disappointing given that the M has a hybrid AF system that is designed to combine the speed of phase detection with the accuracy of contrast detection. On the plus side, the M is capable of recording lots of detail and noise is controlled well up to around ISO 3200. Above this, there is some loss of detail caused by the noise reduction that's applied to JPEG images, and I'd recommend shooting RAW files and processing them yourself to get more detail if you want to make A4 or larger prints. The native sensitivity range of the M tops out at ISO 12800, but there's an expansion option equivalent to 25600, which I'd keep for emergencies only. When the automatic or daylight white balance options are used, the M tends to produce rather warm images, and while this may not be entirely accurate, the results are generally pleasant. Purists may not be 100% happy about this, but those looking for a nice picture will be pleased. All things considered, the M is a bit of a mixed bag. The build is nice and solid. The new 18 to 55mm lens is beautifully constructed and is much better than Canon's 18 to 55mm lens for its SLRs. The control system is also well thought out and there's a very responsive touchscreen. Image quality is good and on a par with the 650Ds, in fact even beating it if you use the kit lens. However, the AF system is sometimes a bit slow. The screen suffers from reflections in bright light and there's not much of a grip on the front of the camera. The EOS M is on sale now for $849 or £683 with the 18 to 55mm kit lens. And in the UK, of course, you get the Speedlight 90EX flash gun as well. For more information about the Canon EOS M, take a look at my review in this month's issue.
Olympus has launched 2 new cameras into its pen range to replace the EPL and EPM range in the middle and bottom of the lineup. This is the EPL5. It replaces the EPL3 and contains the same 16.1 million pixel sensor and image processor as the highly regarded Olympus OMD, which was announced at the beginning of the year. This should mean that the EPL5 is capable of producing the same fantastic image quality, but with the advantage of a smaller and more compact body. One of the biggest differences between the EPL5 and the OMD is the lack of a built-in viewfinder. An optional one can be purchased separately, but it's something to think about if you prefer not to use the screen to compose. The screen itself marries together 2 of the best features of previous pen series cameras, being both tiltable and a touchscreen. It can be tilted upwards for self-portraits or downwards for shooting from low down. Unfortunately, it's not fully articulating, so using it in portrait mode isn't quite so easy. Unlike a couple of the other compact system cameras currently available on the market, the EPL5 doesn't have inbuilt Wi-Fi. However, it is compatible with Toshiba's Flash Air Wireless LAN SDHC cards. This means you can transfer your images across to a smartphone or tablet without needing to connect to an internet connection. You can't control the camera with the Olympus app, which is available as a free download, but perhaps that's something that could happen in the future. One of the biggest benefits of Olympus pen cameras is their incredibly quick focusing speeds. Olympus and Panasonic both claim to have the fastest speeds in the world, and this EPL5 certainly does deliver. You can use a touchscreen to set the autofocus point, or have it focus and take the picture when touched. As you can see, the speeds here are really very quick, especially in good lighting conditions. As we were expecting, images straight from the EPL5 are very good. That great OMD sensor works well to deliver images which are punchy with fantastic colours and lots of detail. Overall, the EPL5 is a great camera, combining some of the best technology from its critically acclaimed OMD with the stylish and compact bodies the pen series have become known for. We can see this being a very popular model for both enthusiasts and novices, especially with its fun features such as digital art filters. For my full review of the Olympus Pen EPL5, see this month's issue.